The most important conversations in your life are not the ones you have with other people. They are the ones happening silently inside you while you watch, listen, and interpret the world. Every day, you're surrounded by human behavior, words spoken, words avoided, gestures made without awareness, emotions leaking through tone, posture, timing. Most people move through these moments half asleep. They hear words, but miss meaning. They see actions, but ignore patterns. They react instead of reading. And because of that, they are constantly surprised by people, betrayed, disappointed, confused, manipulated, or misunderstood. Reading people is not a trick. It is not manipulation. It is not mind control. It is awareness. It is the ability to notice what is already there. Human behavior follows structure, not rigid rules, but rhythms. When you learn to feel those rhythms, you stop guessing. You stop personalizing everything. You stop handing your emotional power to people who do not even understand themselves. You begin to see clearly. Modern life has made this skill more necessary than ever. We live in a world of noise, performance, and masks. People curate personalities. They speak confidence while carrying insecurity. They smile while hiding resentment. They agree while planning resistance. Social norms reward appearance more than truth, speed more than reflection, reaction more than understanding. In such a world, the ability to read people instantly is not about judging them. It is about protecting your energy, choosing your responses wisely, and aligning yourself with reality instead of illusion. Human behavior is driven by one core force: the need to feel safe, significant, and in control. Every action you witness is an attempt, successful or not, to satisfy one of these needs. Some people seek safety through approval. Some seek significance through dominance. Some seek control through withdrawal. When you understand this, behavior stops feeling random. Even destructive behavior begins to make sense, not as something to excuse, but as something to recognize early. Think about the last time someone's actions confused you. Maybe they said they cared, but their behavior created distance. Maybe they promised consistency, but showed unpredictability. Maybe they appeared calm, yet their presence felt tense. Your confusion did not come from a lack of intelligence. It came from focusing on words instead of alignment. Human behavior always reveals truth through consistency, not expression. People tell you who they are over time through patterns, not declarations. Your mind is constantly scanning for signals, whether you realize it or not. Tone shifts, eye contact changes, pauses lengthen, energy contracts or expands. The body responds faster than language. Before a person explains themselves, their nervous system already has. When you learn to trust your observations instead of dismissing them, reading people becomes less effortful and more intuitive. But intuition is not magic. It is experience processed correctly. Most people suppress their intuition because they were taught to be polite, to doubt themselves, to override discomfort, to explain away red flags. They tell themselves stories to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Over time, this creates internal confusion. The signal is there, but the mind argues against it. Reading people instantly begins with one inner discipline: believing what you notice without rushing to judge it. Human behavior is layered. What people show is rarely the whole story. Beneath behavior is emotion. Beneath emotion is belief. Beneath belief is identity. When you learn to listen at all these levels, conversations transform. A defensive reaction stops being an attack and starts revealing fear. Excessive confidence stops impressing you and starts signaling insecurity. Silence stops feeling empty and starts speaking loudly. Consider how people handle power, even small amounts of it. Watch how someone behaves when they have nothing to gain. Notice how they treat people who cannot benefit them. Pay attention to how they respond when they are mildly challenged. Behavior under pressure is not a distortion of character. It is a revelation of it. Pressure removes rehearsed responses and exposes defaults. Most people believe reading others means looking outward. In reality, it begins inward. You cannot clearly read others if you are emotionally reactive. Strong emotions blur perception. When you crave approval, you will miss disrespect. When you fear abandonment, you will overlook inconsistency. When you seek validation, you will mistake attention for care. Emotional discipline is perception discipline. This is why long-term personal growth is essential to psychological clarity. The more regulated you are, the clearer you see. The calmer your nervous system, the more accurately you interpret signals. Reading people instantly does not come from hyperanalysis. It comes from presence, from being grounded enough to notice what is unfolding without rushing to control it. People reveal themselves through habits more than moments. The way someone handles small responsibilities reflects how they will handle larger ones. The way they speak about others reveals how they think about loyalty. The way they manage frustration shows how they handle stress. Patterns repeat because they're comfortable. Change requires effort, and most people operate on emotional autopilot. There's a subtle difference between listening and waiting to speak. Most people are not listening to understand. They are listening to respond. When you truly listen, you notice what is avoided, not just what is said. You hear contradictions between tone and content. You sense emotional charge behind neutral words. Silence becomes informative rather than awkward. The human mind leaks truth constantly. It leaks through timing, responses that come too fast or too slow. It leaks through exaggeration. It leaks through defensiveness. When someone feels secure, their behavior is economical. They do not over-explain. They do not rush to prove. They do not force impressions. Insecurity, on the other hand, is loud. It tries to control perception. Understanding this changes how you relate to people. You stop arguing with defensiveness and start disengaging from it. You stop chasing mixed signals and start observing them. You stop asking why someone behaves a certain way and start asking whether their behavior aligns with your standards. Reading people is not about decoding them for curiosity. It is about making grounded decisions. Discipline plays a quiet but powerful role here. The discipline to pause before reacting. The discipline to observe before attaching meaning. The discipline to let behavior unfold over time instead of forcing conclusions. Consistency sharpens perception. When you practice noticing without interference, patterns become obvious. There's a reason some people seem emotionally intelligent without trying. They are not smarter. They are steadier. They do not need immediate certainty. They allow time to reveal truth. They are comfortable with ambiguity. And because of that, they are rarely blindsided. Human behavior is also shaped by unhealed experiences. People carry unresolved emotional memories that influence how they interpret the present. A neutral comment can feel like rejection. A simple boundary can feel like abandonment. When you understand this, you stop personalizing reactions that were never about you. This does not mean tolerating harm. It means understanding context without absorbing damage. When someone repeatedly shows you who they are, believe them, not emotionally, but practically. Belief does not require resentment. It requires acceptance. Acceptance allows you to adjust your expectations and protect your inner balance. You stop trying to change people through explanation. You start choosing your proximity wisely. Reading people instantly is not about speed. It is about accuracy. Sometimes the most powerful insight comes not in the first interaction, but in noticing what stays the same across many. True understanding is cumulative. It builds quietly, moment by moment, observation by observation. As you continue listening, you may notice your own awareness sharpening. You may reflect on past interactions differently. You may realize moments where your intuition was accurate but ignored. This is not regret. This is growth. Awareness expands backward before it moves forward. In the next part of this audiobook, we will go deeper into the invisible forces shaping behavior, how identity, fear, and desire silently guide actions, how people reveal their inner world without words, and how you can remain grounded and self-directed while navigating complex human dynamics. For now, let your mind rest in this understanding. Clarity is not something you force. It is something you allow by becoming still enough to see. And when you see clearly, you move differently. As you continue deeper into this understanding, something subtle begins to happen. You stop trying to figure people out as puzzles to be solved, and instead you start experiencing them as systems unfolding in real time. This shift is quiet but profound. It is the difference between forcing insight and receiving it. Human behavior is shaped by repetition. What a person repeatedly thinks becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes comfortable. What is comfortable becomes automatic. Most people live inside these automatic patterns without ever questioning them. They react before they reflect. They defend before they understand. They speak before they listen. When you learn to observe these repetitions, you are no longer surprised by outcomes. You see them forming long before they arrive. One of the clearest indicators of a person's inner world is how they handle discomfort. Some people externalize it. They blame, criticize, distract, or dominate. Others internalize it. They withdraw, self-doubt, minimize, or overthink. Both are strategies, learned over time, often unconsciously. Neither is random. When you recognize these patterns, you stop engaging in emotional tug-of-war. You respond with clarity instead of impulse. Notice how people relate to boundaries. Boundaries are psychological mirrors. A person who respects your boundaries likely respects their own. A person who consistently tests, ignores, or resents them is revealing something important. Not about your boundaries, but about their relationship with control and entitlement. You do not need to argue this point with them. Their behavior has already communicated it. Reading people instantly does not mean drawing final conclusions quickly. It means forming provisional understanding that updates with evidence. This is a mature mindset. It allows flexibility without naivete. You remain open, but not exposed. Curious, but not gullible. Present, but not absorbed. The more emotionally literate you become, the less dramatic life feels. You stop being pulled into emotional storms that are not yours to manage. You recognize when someone is projecting their internal conflict outward. You notice when anger is covering fear, when humor is covering avoidance, when confidence is covering fragility. This does not make you superior. It makes you calm. Calm is power in human interaction. Calm allows space. Space reveals truth. When you do not rush to fill silence, others often reveal more than they intended. When you do not rush to reassure, people show you how they handle uncertainty. When you do not rush to defend yourself, others expose their assumptions. There's also an important truth to confront. You are always reading people, but you are also being read. Your energy, consistency, and emotional regulation sends signals before you speak. The way you respond to pressure teaches others how to treat you. The way you handle disrespect trains people whether to repeat it. Self-awareness sharpens external awareness. Many people struggle with reading others because they have not learned to read themselves. They're disconnected from their own emotional signals. They override intuition with logic or drown logic in emotion. Integration is the goal. When thought and feeling work together, perception becomes clear. Think about how often people say one thing and do another. This gap is not always intentional deception. Often, it is internal conflict. A person may want closeness but fear vulnerability. They may want growth but fear discomfort. Behavior follows the strongest emotion in the moment, not the strongest intention. Understanding this prevents you from clinging to words while ignoring actions. As you observe more, you will notice that some people thrive on chaos. Conflict energizes them. Uncertainty gives them a sense of control. Others crave stability, but unconsciously create instability because it feels familiar. Familiarity is powerful, even when it is unhealthy. Recognizing familiarity patterns helps you understand why people repeat the same relationships, mistakes, and outcomes. This awareness also turns inward. You begin to notice your own patterns, where you over-explain, where you tolerate too much, where you pull away instead of speaking. This is not self-criticism. It is self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is the foundation of change. Discipline in this context is not harsh control. It is gentle consistency. The discipline to observe daily. The discipline to pause before reacting. The discipline to choose responses aligned with long-term clarity rather than short-term relief. Over time, this discipline compounds. Your understanding deepens. Your reactions soften. Your confidence stabilizes. Confidence that comes from perception is different from confidence that comes from performance. It is quieter. It does not need to be proven. It does not collapse under disagreement. When you understand people, you are less threatened by them. You do not need to dominate or submit. You engage from choice. There will be moments when clarity brings disappointment. You may see that someone cannot meet you where you hoped. You may recognize limitations that cannot be negotiated. This is not loss. It is alignment. Clarity saves time, energy, and emotional investment. It allows you to grieve illusions instead of living inside them. Human behavior changes slowly, if at all, without conscious effort. Promises are easy. Patterns are honest. When you align your expectations with patterns instead of promises, relationships become simpler. Not easier, but clearer. And clarity is a form of peace. As this understanding settles, you may notice yourself becoming less reactive to external noise. Opinions hold less power over you. Manipulation feels more obvious. You sense when to lean in and when to step back. This is not detachment from life. It is engagement with discernment. Reading people instantly is not about predicting every action. It is about recognizing trajectories. Direction matters more than speed. When you see where someone is headed emotionally and psychologically, you can decide whether to walk alongside them, adjust your pace, or choose a different path. In the quiet moments, reflect on this. Every interaction is information. Every reaction is data. Every pattern is a message. When you learn to listen without distortion, life becomes a teacher instead of a test. As this audiobook continues, allow these ideas to integrate slowly. There is no rush. Understanding human behavior is not a skill you finish. It is a practice you deepen. With time, patience, and awareness, you begin to move through the world with steady eyes and a calm mind, seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and living for grounded understanding rather than emotional impulse. And in that clarity, you discover something powerful. You do not need to control people to feel safe. You need to understand yourself well enough to respond to reality as it is. When you no longer rush to label people as good or bad, right or wrong, you begin to see something more accurate. People are consistent with who they believe they are. Identity drives behavior more powerfully than logic ever will. A person will abandon facts to protect identity. They will distort reality to maintain a self-image. This is not weakness. It is human nature. And when you understand this, arguments lose their grip on you. You stop trying to convince. You start observing alignment. Notice how people react when their identity feels threatened. Some become defensive. Some become dismissive. Some become sarcastic. Some retreat into silence. These reactions are not about the topic at hand. They are about self-preservation. When you recognize this, you stop taking resistance personally. You realize you're not fighting ideas. You are witnessing protection mechanisms. Protection mechanisms are learned early. Long before adulthood, people learn what feels safe. They learn how to gain approval, how to avoid pain, how to stay in control. These strategies become automatic. By the time someone is grown, they're often living out scripts they never consciously chose. Reading people means noticing these scripts playing out in real time. Pay attention to emotional timing. When someone reacts strongly to something small, it is rarely about the present moment alone. The reaction is carrying emotional weight from elsewhere. Stored frustration, unresolved disappointment, unmet needs. The present becomes a trigger, not a cause. When you understand this, you stop escalating situations unnecessarily. You respond to the moment, not the emotional backlog. This is where patience becomes a psychological advantage. Impatience clouds perception. It pushes you to demand clarity before it is available. Patience allows patterns to reveal themselves naturally. When you are patient, you do not interrupt behavior with assumptions. You let it speak. You may begin to notice that some people seek intensity rather than intimacy. They confuse emotional highs and lows with connection. Calm feels boring to them because chaos is familiar. This explains why some relationships feel draining despite moments of passion. Understanding this helps you avoid mistaking emotional volatility for depth. There is also a quieter truth. People treat you according to how you treat yourself. Not consciously, but energetically. When you respect your own time, others are more likely to do the same. When you tolerate disrespect, you silently teach others that it is acceptable. Reading people includes reading how they respond to your self-respect. As your awareness deepens, you may feel less urgency to be understood. This is a sign of inner stability. When you no longer need validation from every interaction, you become more selective with your energy. You listen more. You speak with intention. You choose silence when words would only create noise. Silence is often misunderstood. Many people fear it because it removes distraction. In silence, truth surfaces, discomfort rises. When you are comfortable with silence, you gain access to information others miss. People reveal themselves when they try to fill it. Human behavior is also shaped by expectations. People often behave in ways that confirm what they believe about the world. If they expect rejection, they may act guarded. If they expect betrayal, they may test loyalty. If they expect failure, they may sabotage progress. Recognizing expectation-driven behavior allows you to respond with empathy without becoming entangled. Empathy, however, does not mean self-sacrifice. Understanding someone's pain does not require you to carry it. Compassion without boundaries leads to exhaustion. Boundaries without compassion lead to isolation. Balance is wisdom. Over time, reading people becomes less about effort and more about alignment. You sense when something feels off without needing to justify it immediately. You trust that clarity will come with time. You stop forcing closeness where there is resistance. You stop chasing explanations where behavior is already clear. This clarity changes how you experience conflict. Conflict stops being something to win or avoid. It becomes information. How someone handles disagreement reveals their emotional maturity. Do they listen or dominate? Do they seek resolution or control? Do they stay grounded or escalate? These moments are revealing because they strip away performance. You may also notice that people often project their unacknowledged traits onto others. The critic sees criticism everywhere. The dishonest person suspects dishonesty. Projection is a psychological mirror. When you understand this, accusations lose their sting. You respond thoughtfully instead of defensively. Reading people instantly does not mean you become detached or cold. On the contrary, it often makes you more compassionate. You see the struggles beneath the surface. You understand the fears driving behavior. But compassion guided by clarity protects you from self-betrayal. There will be times when understanding leads to difficult choices. You may need to step away from relationships that no longer align. You may need to adjust expectations with people you care about. These decisions require courage, not anger. They are acts of self-respect. Growth in this area is gradual. There is no final moment where you suddenly understand everyone perfectly. What changes is your relationship with uncertainty. You become comfortable not knowing everything immediately. You allow people to reveal themselves at their own pace. And you trust yourself to respond appropriately when they do. As you continue listening, let these ideas settle into your awareness. Let them influence how you observe, how you pause, how you choose. Over time, you'll notice a shift. Fewer emotional surprises. Less confusion, more calm confidence in your interactions. This is the quiet power of understanding human behavior. It does not announce itself. It stabilizes you. It allows you to move through the world awake, grounded, and discerning. Reading not just people, but situations, patterns, and yourself with clarity that grows deeper with every moment of mindful attention. And as that clarity deepens, you realize something essential. The better you understand human behavior, the less you're controlled by it. As this understanding continues to settle, something else begins to emerge. A quieter awareness of how much human behavior is driven not by what people want, but by what they're trying to avoid. Avoidance is one of the strongest psychological forces. People avoid discomfort, avoid uncertainty, avoid responsibility, avoid vulnerability. And when you learn to see avoidance, you begin to understand behavior that once seemed illogical. Watch how people change the subject when a conversation gets close to something real. Notice the jokes, the distractions, the sudden busyness. These are not random. They are exits. The mind is searching for relief. When you stop chasing depth with people who are committed to avoidance, you save yourself frustration. You let them stay where they are without trying to pull them somewhere they are not ready to go. Avoidance also shows up in overthinking. Some people live in their minds because action feels risky. Thought becomes a hiding place. Others live in action because stillness feels threatening. Movement becomes a distraction. Both patterns reveal discomfort with presence. When you can see this, you stop misinterpreting energy. You understand why some people promise change endlessly but never move, while others stay busy yet never grow. Human beings rarely change because of insight alone. Insight is important, but behavior changes when pain outweighs comfort. Until then, patterns persist. This is why listening to what people say about change is far less useful than watching what they consistently do. Desire without movement is not intention. It is fantasy. This understanding sharpens your discernment. You begin to notice effort, not excuses. You recognize growth through consistency, not intensity. You stop being impressed by emotional speeches and start valuing quiet follow-through. These shifts protect you from emotional manipulation, both from others and from yourself. There's also a deeper layer to reading people that many overlook: energy congruence. When words, tone, body language, and timing align, trust feels natural. When they do not, something feels off. This sensation is not imagination. It is perception. Your nervous system is responding to inconsistency. Learning to respect this response is a form of intelligence. Many people have been conditioned to override this inner signal. They tell themselves they are overreacting, too sensitive, or unfair. Over time, this creates internal confusion. Rebuilding trust with your own perception takes patience. It requires slowing down and allowing yourself to notice without immediately explaining away what you feel. When you stop needing immediate certainty, your perception sharpens. You allow time to reveal coherence or contradiction. You let people show you who they are across situations, not just moments. This patience is not passive. It is active observation. You may also begin to notice how status affects behavior. Some people become smaller around those they perceive as superior. Others become inflated. Some perform. Some withdraw. These shifts reveal self-concept more than respect. True confidence remains relatively stable across environments. It does not need to adjust constantly to feel safe. Understanding this changes how you interpret charm. Charm is not inherently dishonest, but it can be used to bypass discernment. When someone relies heavily on charm, notice what it is compensating for. Substance does not need constant polish. Depth does not rush to impress. As you deepen this awareness, you also become more mindful of your own behavior. You begin to notice when you're seeking reassurance instead of clarity, when you are explaining instead of embodying, when you are hoping instead of observing. This self-observation is not meant to make you rigid. It is meant to make you honest. Honesty with yourself is the foundation of reading others. Self-deception distorts perception. When you face your own motivations clearly, your fears, desires, and patterns, you become less reactive to those same dynamics in others. You stop projecting your inner world outward. Projection is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human psychology. People often assume others think, feel, and intend as they do. This creates unnecessary conflict. When you understand projection, you stop assuming shared meaning. You ask better questions. You listen for context. You allow difference without threat. Over time, you may notice that certain people trigger you more than others. This is valuable information. Strong emotional reactions often signal unresolved material within yourself. This does not mean others are blameless. It means growth is happening at the intersection of interaction and self-awareness. Instead of suppressing these reactions, observe them. Ask what they are pointing toward. Is it a boundary needing reinforcement? A value being challenged? A fear being activated? This reflective pause transforms emotional reactivity into insight. Reading people also involves understanding timing. When people are under stress, their best qualities may temporarily disappear. When they feel safe, their generosity may surface. This does not mean you ignore harmful behavior. It means you contextualize it without excusing it. You respond wisely instead of emotionally. Wisdom is not perfection. It is responsiveness. It is the ability to adjust without losing yourself. When you cultivate this, interactions feel less draining. You stop trying to manage other people's emotions. You focus on managing your responses. There's a quiet confidence that comes from this. You no longer need to prove your intelligence, kindness, or worth. You trust that clarity will guide you. You choose environments and relationships that support stability rather than chaos. As the hours of listening continue, you may notice that your inner dialogue begins to slow. You are less pulled into assumptions, less tempted to rush conclusions, more comfortable with observation. This is the mind becoming disciplined, not rigid but steady. Steadiness allows compassion to coexist with boundaries. You can care without rescuing, understand without absorbing, support without self-erasure. This balance is rare, and it is powerful. Human behavior will always be complex. People will surprise you. Emotions will fluctuate. Misunderstandings will happen. Reading people does not eliminate uncertainty. It equips you to navigate it without losing clarity or self-respect. As this audiobook continues toward its deeper layers, remember this: the goal is not to master others. It is to master your relationship with reality. When you see clearly, you suffer less. When you respond consciously, you create stability. When you trust patterns over promises, you protect your peace. And slowly, almost without noticing, you become someone others feel understood by. Not because you agree with them, but because you see them. And in seeing them clearly, you also see yourself with greater honesty, depth, and calm authority. This is how true understanding unfolds, quietly, consistently, and over time, until clarity becomes not something you practice, but something you live. As your awareness continues to deepen, you may begin to notice something subtle but important. Most misunderstandings between people are not caused by malice, but by misalignment of inner worlds. People live inside different psychological climates. What feels neutral to one person feels threatening to another. What feels obvious to you may feel invisible to someone else. When you understand this, you stop assuming shared perception. You begin to listen for emotional meaning, not just logical content. Human behavior is often an attempt to regulate internal states. People speak to calm themselves, to reassure themselves, to feel important, to feel safe. When you recognize this, conversations become less personal and more informative. You hear the need behind the words. You sense the emotion beneath the posture. You understand why some people repeat themselves, not because they want to convince you, but because they're trying to convince themselves. This realization changes how you respond. Instead of reacting to the surface, you respond to the depth. Sometimes that response is engagement. Sometimes it is distance. Sometimes it is silence. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not avoidance. It is clarity refusing to participate in confusion. As you move through life with this awareness, you begin to notice how people handle truth. Some are curious. Some are defensive. Some are dismissive. Truth challenges identity. For someone whose sense of self is fragile, truth can feel like an attack. This is why facts alone rarely change behavior. People change when they feel safe enough to question themselves. Safety is not softness. It is emotional stability. When you're stable, others feel less need to perform or defend. But stability does not mean tolerating disrespect. It means addressing reality without escalation. It means choosing responses that align with who you are becoming, not who you were conditioned to be. You may begin to see how emotional immaturity expresses itself. It shows up as blame instead of responsibility, drama instead of dialogue, control instead of cooperation. When you recognize these signs, you stop engaging at levels that drain you. You adjust your expectations. You conserve your energy. Energy is one of the most underestimated currencies in human interaction. Where you place your attention shapes your emotional state. When you spend energy trying to decode chaos, you lose clarity. When you invest energy in observing patterns calmly, you gain insight. This shift alone transforms your experience of people. As your discernment sharpens, you may feel a growing sense of inner authority. Not dominance, but self-trust. You stop asking others to validate what you already perceive. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop explaining your boundaries to those committed to misunderstanding them. This does not make you cold. It makes you precise. Precision is kindness to yourself. It prevents resentment. It allows generosity where it is appreciated and restraint where it is necessary. Human behavior is also deeply influenced by environment. People adapt to what is rewarded. If chaos brings attention, chaos will continue. If accountability is ignored, irresponsibility grows. When you understand this, you become more intentional about the environments you remain in. You realize that leaving is sometimes the most respectful response to yourself and to reality. There's a quiet grief that comes with clarity. You may see potential that will not be fulfilled. You may recognize patterns that will not change. This grief is not pessimism. It is acceptance. And acceptance frees you from false hope, which is one of the most exhausting emotional states. As acceptance settles, something else rises: peace. Not excitement, not certainty, peace. The peace of not forcing outcomes. The peace of not needing to rescue, convince, or chase. The peace of knowing that understanding does not require agreement. Reading people instantly is ultimately about reading direction. Are they moving toward growth or stagnation? Toward accountability or avoidance? Toward openness or control? Direction tells you more than speed. Someone moving slowly toward growth is different from someone moving quickly in circles. This understanding also softens your judgment. You see how difficult growth is, how uncomfortable self-awareness can be. You recognize that everyone is negotiating their own fears and limitations. Compassion deepens, not as indulgence, but as realism. At the same time, your standards become clearer. Compassion does not mean lowering them. It means holding them without anger. You stop trying to force people to meet you. You simply notice who already can. As this audiobook stretches on, allow these insights to integrate into your daily life. Notice interactions as they happen. Observe without commentary. Feel without reacting. Let understanding arise naturally. Over time, this becomes effortless. You may find yourself speaking less and meaning more, listening more and absorbing less, engaging where there is reciprocity, stepping back where there is resistance. These are signs of psychological maturity. Maturity is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of choice. Choice in how you respond. Choice in what you tolerate. Choice in where you invest your time and trust. Trust, when grounded in observation rather than fantasy, becomes stable. You trust patterns. You trust consistency. You trust alignment. And most importantly, you trust yourself to respond when alignment breaks. As this final stretch unfolds, recognize the transformation taking place. You are no longer seeking to read people to gain advantage. You are learning to read reality to gain peace. You're learning to see clearly so you can move deliberately. In a world full of noise, reactivity, and confusion, clarity is a rare skill. It does not shout. It does not impress. It steadies. And from that steadiness, life becomes less about surviving interactions and more about choosing them wisely. And so, as this listening journey continues toward completion, let this truth settle deeply within you. When you understand human behavior, you stop being controlled by it. You stop being surprised by it. You stop fearing it. You meet people where they are without abandoning where you are. That is not just insight. That is freedom. As the listening continues, it becomes easier to notice how deeply habits shape behavior. Habits are not just routines of action. They're routines of thought, emotion, and interpretation. A person does not merely react out of character. They react out of conditioning. And conditioning, once established, prefers familiarity over truth. This is why people often return to the same types of relationships, conflicts, and disappointments. The mind seeks what it knows, not what is best. When you see this, you stop asking why someone repeats a pattern and start recognizing that repetition feels safer to them than change. Change threatens identity. Familiar pain feels controllable. Unfamiliar peace feels risky. Understanding this helps you avoid one of the most common emotional traps. Expecting someone to become different simply because the cost of staying the same is obvious to you. Awareness does not automatically produce action. Many people can see the problem clearly and still remain attached to it. This is not ignorance. It is emotional attachment. Attachment is powerful. It binds people to roles, stories, and self-images long after they stop serving them. Some people are attached to being the victim, others to being the rescuer, others to being the strong one who never needs help. These roles create predictability, and predictability creates a sense of control. When you learn to read these roles, interactions make more sense. You stop trying to change the script. You realize that stepping out of a role threatens the entire emotional structure of the relationship. This is why growth often creates distance. When one person changes, the system must adapt or resist. Resistance often looks like criticism, guilt, withdrawal, or subtle sabotage. Not because the other person is cruel, but because your change disrupts their emotional equilibrium. Seeing this clearly prevents you from shrinking yourself to maintain comfort for others. Reading people also means reading emotional investment. Notice where someone places their energy consistently. What do they protect? What do they avoid? What do they prioritize under stress? These reveal values more honestly than stated beliefs. When actions and values align, trust grows. When they do not, confusion follows. Confusion is often a signal that you're listening to words instead of patterns. Patterns do not lie. They repeat until acknowledged. When you stop explaining patterns away, clarity arrives. As your perception sharpens, you may find yourself less reactive to emotional hooks. Provocation loses power when you recognize its purpose. Some people provoke to feel alive. Some provoke to feel dominant. Some provoke to deflect attention from their own discomfort. When you see the function, you're no longer compelled to respond. Response becomes a choice, and choice restores dignity. There's also an important distinction to make between empathy and emotional fusion. Empathy allows understanding without absorption. Emotional fusion pulls you into another person's inner world until you lose your own footing. Reading people well requires separation. You observe without merging. You care without carrying. This separation does not make you distant. It makes you grounded. Grounded people can stay present in emotional situations without being overwhelmed. They do not escalate unnecessarily. They do not suppress truth to maintain peace. They choose clarity over comfort. Comfort is often the enemy of growth. Comfort keeps patterns intact. Clarity disrupts them. This is why honest insight can feel unsettling at first. It removes illusions. It demands adjustment. But once integrated, it brings stability far deeper than comfort ever could. As you continue listening, notice how often people seek certainty from others. They ask questions they already sense the answers to. They seek reassurance instead of alignment. When you see this, you stop being pulled into emotional negotiations. You offer honesty instead of comfort when appropriate. Silence instead of reassurance when needed. Silence, again, plays a crucial role. When you do not rush to fill space, people reveal priorities. They show you what they need, what they fear, and what they expect. Silence exposes motivation. Motivation is the engine of behavior. When motivation changes, behavior follows. Until then, promises remain theoretical. Reading motivation allows you to predict behavior without cynicism. You're not assuming the worst. You are acknowledging reality. Reality-based understanding is calming. It removes the shock from disappointment. It allows you to prepare emotionally rather than react emotionally. Preparation is a form of self-respect. As your understanding deepens, you may feel less need to be right. Being right loses its appeal when clarity becomes the goal. You realize that winning arguments rarely improves relationships. Understanding dynamics does. You also begin to notice how often people communicate indirectly. They hint instead of state. They test instead of ask. They withdraw instead of confront. These strategies are attempts to manage risk. When you recognize them, you can choose whether to engage directly or disengage peacefully. Directness requires courage. Not everyone has it, and not everyone wants it. Reading people helps you decide when directness will build connection and when it will create resistance. Timing matters. Over time, you may notice a growing trust in your own pacing. You no longer rush decisions. You allow relationships to reveal themselves. You feel less pressure to define everything immediately. This patience protects you from premature attachment. Attachment formed before clarity often leads to suffering. Attachment formed after clarity leads to stability. This is one of the quiet rewards of discernment. As this audiobook approaches its later stages, the focus shifts subtly from understanding others to embodying understanding yourself. You begin to live differently. You move through conversations with ease. You sense when to speak and when to listen. You recognize when something is aligned and when it is not. Alignment feels calm. Misalignment feels tense. Your body knows before your mind explains. Trusting this signal is a skill developed through observation and self-honesty. Self-honesty is not harsh. It is gentle but firm. It asks you to face what is, not what you wish were true. This honesty strengthens your inner foundation. From that foundation, reading others becomes natural. As minutes turn into hours of listening, allow this realization to anchor deeply. You do not need to understand everyone fully. You need to understand enough to choose wisely. Wisdom is selective attention. It is knowing where to invest and where to withdraw. Withdrawal, when chosen consciously, is not avoidance. It is alignment. It is honoring your limits. It is protecting your capacity to show up fully where it matters. In the end, reading people instantly is not about speed or cleverness. It is about presence. Presence allows you to notice patterns without force. Presence allows you to respond without regret. Presence allows you to remain yourself regardless of who you are with. And as this listening journey nears completion, something settles quietly within you. A sense of steadiness, a sense of trust, a sense of inner authority that does not need approval. You understand now that human behavior is not something to fear or control. It is something to observe, respect, and respond wisely. When you see clearly, you move freely. And that freedom, quiet, grounded, and earned, is the true reward of understanding the psychology of human behavior. As this listening experience draws toward its final stretch, there is no need to rush your mind toward an ending. Understanding human behavior is not a destination you arrive at once. It is a way of seeing that continues to unfold long after the words stop. What matters now is not memorizing insights, but allowing them to settle into how you move through the world. At this stage, something subtle has likely shifted. You may notice that your inner reactions feel slower, more spacious. Where there was once urgency, there is now curiosity. Where there was once confusion, there is now observation. This is not because the world has become simpler, but because you have become steadier. Steadiness is one of the most underrated psychological strengths. A steady mind is not easily manipulated. It does not swing wildly between hope and disappointment. It does not cling to fantasy when reality speaks clearly. It listens. It waits. It chooses. When you understand human behavior, you stop fighting it. You stop expecting people to act outside their level of awareness. You stop being shocked when patterns repeat. This does not make life dull. It makes life honest. And honesty, while sometimes uncomfortable, is grounding. Grounded people live differently. They are less performative. They do not need to announce who they are. Their presence communicates clarity. They know when to lean in and when to step back. They are not driven by fear of loss or hunger for validation. They are guided by alignment. Alignment is the quiet agreement between what you observe and how you respond. When alignment is present, there is little inner conflict. You do not argue with yourself after interactions. You do not replay conversations endlessly. You You trust that you responded from awareness, not impulse. This trust is built over time. Each moment you choose observation over reaction strengthens it. Each boundary you honor reinforces it. Each time you accept reality instead of resisting it, you deepen it. Slowly, your inner world becomes calmer. Not because life is easy, but because you are no longer at war with what is. You begin to see people as they are, not as you need them to be. This alone dissolves much suffering. Expectations soften. Resentments lose fuel. Compassion grows, but it is no longer self-sacrificing. It is balanced, grounded, and clear-eyed. There is also a quiet humility that emerges from this understanding. You recognize that you, too, are a work in progress, that you have patterns still unfolding. That growth is not linear. This humility keeps you open without making you naive. It keeps learning alive. As you move forward, remember this. Insight is only powerful when it changes behavior. Not dramatically, not overnight, but subtly. In how long you pause before responding. In how quickly you disengage from chaos. In how gently you redirect your attention toward what nourishes you. Over time, these small shifts accumulate. Your relationships become simpler. Your decisions become cleaner. Your emotional energy feels less scattered. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You stop chasing clarity from those unwilling to offer it. You trust yourself to notice when something is right and when it is not. This trust is not arrogance. It is self-respect. And self-respect changes how others relate to you. Some will step closer. Some will step away. Both outcomes are information. Both are acceptable. You no longer need to force alignment. As this audiobook reaches its conclusion, let one final understanding rest with you. Reading people instantly is not about predicting them perfectly. It is about staying connected to reality without losing connection to yourself. It is about seeing clearly and responding consciously. Life will continue to present complexity. People will continue to surprise you. Emotions will continue to rise and fall. But you now have a steadier lens through which to view it all. A lens shaped by observation, patience, and inner discipline. When you move through the world this way, you are less reactive, less confused, and less controlled by external forces. You become someone who listens deeply, chooses deliberately, and lives with quiet confidence. There is nothing dramatic about this transformation. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply changes the quality of your inner experience, and from there, the quality of your life. And so, as these words gently come to rest, allow yourself to carry this clarity forward, not as a technique, not as a performance, but as a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of responding to human behavior with calm understanding and grounded wisdom. That is where real power lies. Not in control, not in prediction, but in clarity. And clarity, once cultivated, stays with you.